It's wonderful to be here. I've had so many great times at Rice University, and this is a wonderful opportunity. So my name is Cary Jensen. I'm the Chief Technical Officer of Jensen Data Systems, and I am an adjunct professor in the Human-Computer Interaction Group in the Department of Psychological Sciences here at Rice University. And I can't fit that on a business card. Okay, so before I get started, I do want to mention that several times during my talk, I'll say something like, we did this or we did that. And I'm referring to my wife, Dr. Loy Anderson. Loy and I met 2 weeks before classes started on our first year at graduate school. And we defended our dissertations, our doctoral dissertations, on the same day 5 years later. And we got married 3.5 weeks after that. And then after our honeymoon, we started a business, which eventually became Jensen Data Systems. And we've been in business now for 36 years. So let's look at the items I'm going to cover today. I'm going to start with a definition of communicating effectively, or actually really a definition of communication. And then I'm going to talk about why communicating effectively is important. I'm going to give a very rough breakdown on communication, and then I'm going to talk about speaking effectively, writing effectively, and then we'll wrap it all up. So I love this definition. This is from dictionary.com. It is the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or sign. And in this case, I'm going to treat sign and speech the same because it's similar in terms of it's a stream of information that comes. It's not something like a book where you could skip a chapter or go back and reread a chapter. So we'll wrap that into that. Now, why is communicating effectively important? Well, if you're a teacher, an instructor, a trainer, it's essential. If you are applying for a job or looking to advance in a job, it's highly regarded by most employers. If you're a scholar and a researcher, it is the means by which you are sharing your information with your community and participating in the science. And then finally, if you're an entrepreneur, it helps you attract talent. It helps you attract investors. And it also helps you have successful marketing campaigns. Okay, so this is a rough breakdown. I thought about this a lot, and how am I going to do this where I do it effectively and not get into the nitty-gritty. And this is what I came up with. First of all, there's two types of communication. There is collaborative communication, and there's featured communication. Collaborative communication is something like a school board meeting or a homeowners association meeting, or maybe even a public hearing where the community's input is elicited concerning civic projects. So in that case, you're one cog in a greater machine. You're contributing to a greater whole. As for featured speaking, that's what I'm doing right now. It is standing up in front of an audience or communicating to an audience, which may be a single reader of an article I write. That is featured speaking. Now, I've come to the conclusion that there are three basic steps in successful communication, communicating effectively. And that is what I call the POD protocol. And that stands for prepare, organize, and deliver. So let's break that down. Prepare. Number one, understand your audience. It's very different to give a presentation to members of the greater community versus people who are knowledgeable, let's see, other researchers in your area, for instance. You're going to have a different level of context. You're going to go into more detail about aspects of that talk with the community. Most of the people in your audience, when you're talking to colleagues, are going to be familiar with things, and you can skip some of the really basic stuff. Although I will say, when I write, I almost always define an acronym the first time I hit it. It's easy to do, and then from that point on, you don't have to worry about it. Also, know your subject matter to a sufficient level. Even if you're a researcher and are steeped in your topic, there's some things you may want to do. For instance, you may dig a little further and get some additional citations when you're preparing a talk or an article that you're writing or a submission to an academic journal. So know your subject matter. Failure to do that is a disaster. It's a disaster for you, and it's not good for the audience either. Organization is critical. Effective organization means effective communication. Now, I divide this up into introduction, the main body, and conclusion, but there's also a very common philosophy that says, say what you're going to say it, and then say what you said. But there's a lot more nuance than that. So the introduction, for instance, depending on the type of talk you're giving, the type of paper you're writing, the introduction may be either extensive or it may be very short. So for instance, in a scholastic paper or you're submitting to a academic journal, you're going to go into some detail about what research has already been done and have citations for that as well. My presentations are all pretty much technical, and I can put that away with a single sentence. I'm going to talk about this area, and that's it. Then I dive right into it. As for the main body, if it's a scholarly work, a submission to a journal or a presentation to like-minded colleagues, you're going to talk about what you did and what you discovered. For me, it's just, for a software engineer, for instance, I'm talking about, here is a technique, here's another technique that does the same thing, here's yet another technique that does the same thing, and here are the advantages and disadvantages of each one. As for conclusions, again, this is going to depend on how much detail you need to go into. If it's a scholarly paper, then you're going to talk about the ramifications of what you discover and what that means for future research. Sometimes my conclusions are just simply, here's a URL and you'll find the code samples that I demonstrated, and you can go there and download it, and that's all that really needs to be done. As for deliver, anything that's written that you're producing, whether it's a slideshow for a talk or it's a paper you're writing, an article you're writing, a post to a forum, check your spelling and grammar. I mean, it's a simple thing, but it's amazing how many times that's overlooked. And engage your audience. Now, with an audience like you here, I want to do a number of things to make you come into the conversation. And even writing, you know, a lot of people would think, well, how do you engage your audience when you're writing? Well, typically your audience is one person, and you are bringing them into your conversation. But the way I like to think about it is that when I'm writing, I engage them by, it's like I'm sitting next to them in a chair, talking to them, but maybe they've got laryngitis, maybe they got a sore throat and they can't talk. So I'm having to anticipate what they might be thinking, but I bring them into the conversation, even though it is writing. Okay, speaking effectively in a contributory setting, or I guess I say here a contributory setting. I also think of collaborative too. So respect the setting's parameters. You don't go to a school board meeting and as soon as the president of the school board gavels in the meeting, you don't just stand up and say, hey, I've got an issue I want to talk about. You wait until it's time you're called upon to give your presentation. This is obvious stuff, right? Okay, but respect the environment, respect the setting. Be specific. In most cases, you don't have much time in a collaborative setting. So go ahead and make sure that you are concise and direct, that they understand what point you're making, what complaint you're issuing, what recommendation you're making. And then finally, keep to your allotted time. Most cases in a contributory setting, you are limited to so many minutes. Keep to that, because there's other people who are going to want to be contributing as well. Speaking effectively as a featured speaker, speak clearly. If it's a very large auditorium and you have a microphone, use it. But I have one story to tell. Back in the 90s, I introduced a very well-known person onto the stage in front of an audience of 2,500 people. And during the speech actually he made was quite long, so there was an intermission in the middle of it. And he was wearing a microphone. And when he left the stage, he didn't turn it off. And of course, during his break, he went to the restroom. Now, if I remember this correctly, when he came back out on stage, he got a round of applause. It may have been a standing ovation, but nonetheless, it was uncomfortable and it shouldn't have happened. Even in normal situations, when you go off stage, you're often, somebody comes up to you and asks a question. Several people backstage may do that, and that's not for the audience. Turn off your microphone, or in case I can't turn off this microphone from here, so I would take it off when I leave the stage. Engage your audience. This is a big one, and it can be a bit hard. Make eye contact with the audience as much as possible, and smile. This is the one that I have a real problem with. I can come off a talk, and my wife will say, "You looked so serious out there. You look dour." And so here it is, 35 years of making presentations, and I still have to learn how to smile when I'm presenting. And of course, this is an obvious thing too, but you get better at featured speaking by doing it. And this theme will come back again. And if there is a Q&A session, and for instance, this talk does not have a Q&A session, but if there is one, I have some comments about that. Repeat the question to the audience if the audience can't all hear, or in some cases, many speakers will repeat the question that they hear simply to demonstrate that they understand or to confirm that they understand the question. Be succinct with your answer. Some speakers tend to ramble on with their answer, and you don't want to do that. There's other people waiting to ask a question as well. Take off-topic questions offline. This happens all the time. Where someone will ask a question that really is of interest to them, but not really to the general audience. Ask them to meet you outside in the lobby, or email you with the question. But don't waste everybody's time on something that just is really of concern by possibly even a single individual. And here's another hard one. I don't know may just be the right answer. I've so many times seen a speaker who feels, well, I'm up here and I've positioned myself as an expert in this. Here's a question, here's my answer, but is it correct or not? We don't, that's a danger there. So I don't know, may be the right answer. Writing effectively in a collaborative setting. Now, this might be something like an online forum, or you participate in a thread. Familiarize yourself with the parameters and the expected protocol of that particular platform. Also, if you're posting a question to a forum, do your research first and include some of your research in, or at least the relevant research in your question. Your question should be informative and can be informative, but should be. Finally, proofread before you post. Again, I see so many posts that include misspelled words, wrong words that they auto-corrected. So proofread your stuff. Now, writing effectively as an author or as a co-author, especially in academic journal submissions, you often have co-authors, there is a certain pattern. So you have your title, then you have your level 1 heads, and usually there's 3 to 5. Then under each level 1 head, you may have additional heads, level 2 heads, and there's typically 3 to 5. Now, occasionally you might have 2 headings in a section, or 6, but that's unusual, and if it's outside of that, you probably have the wrong structure. Now, there is one exception, bullet points. So, for instance, you may have this very nice structure, and at one point you say, here are 10 things, 10 habits of highly successful people. And you can just have 10 bullet points in a row. So you can have more than 3 to 5, but it's a special case. And normally those bullet points don't have subheadings, but they can if it's appropriate. So take that into account. Also, find your voice. And this is something that's really hard to stress. If you write enough, you will find your voice. And when you find your voice, it's like a gold mine. Once you find your voice, you're going to want to write more because it feels good. You're talking directly through your writing to the reader. Voice is a consistent style and a consistent point of view. And if you do it right, you're letting your personality come out in your writing. When writing for books or academic submissions, you typically are employing other individuals. I like to say in my books that writing is a solitary task, but producing a book is a team effort. You may have certainly copy editors and proofreaders, and if you're writing for a publishing house, they provide those. But if you're doing your own publishing, you're going to have to find a way to have those things taken care of. In addition, you might have technical reviewers or knowledgeable reviewers who will give you feedback as to your content, and that's the teamwork that makes writing good. And the acknowledgement section of your paper, book, whatever, is going to include their names. And you get better at writing by writing. So, in conclusion, communication takes effort. Honor the parameters of your setting. Make it fun, and it will be fun. Now, I have a final story I want to tell. My wife and I finished our first book in 1990. It was a 1,000-page tome published by Osborne McGraw-Hill, which was the computer arm of McGraw-Hill Publishing. And we had worked so hard for about 2.5 years to establish our reputation and write this book. We were exhausted, so we decided to take a vacation. And we went to Honolulu we went to Hawaii, first to Honolulu, and then to Kona on the Big Island. And while walking around the tourist district on the Big Island, we came across a bookstore. And we went in and went directly to the computer book section, and there on the shelf were 2 copies of our book. This is the first time we saw them in the wild. We got so excited. We went up to the front desk and asked to speak to the owner. And the owner came out and we said, "You've got 2 copies of our book on the bookshelf. We can sign those for you." And she said, "Oh, no, you can't sign them. If you sign them, I can't return them." That's a smackdown. Well, I want to thank you very much. I have enjoyed this tremendously. Enjoy the rest of the talks, and